20th Century Fox presents
Ow! I challenge you to a duel.
the first action hero
I accept.
and the last word in comedy.
White men can't jump.
Robin Hood, Men in Tights.
And why should the people listen to you?
Unlike some other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent.
A Mel Brooks film. The legend had it coming. Rated PG-13. Starts Wednesday, July 28th at theaters everywhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Cuson. We are finishing up our discussion of Robin Hood this week, as we will be discussing 1993's Robin Hood, Men in Tights, our very first Mel Brook conversation. As always, leave a 4 or 5 star review on Apple or Spotify to get those algorithms going. Please like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Click the bell icon for notifications. My co-host, as always, is Brian. And Brian, all I could say about this is Robin Hood. We peaked this month with our very first Robin Hood movie, and it just feels like everything else has very much been a mixed bag, including this movie. Although I'm definitely more positive on this than I was last week's selection of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. But Brian, I also did some I did some extra credit by watching the other two modern Robin Hood movies. One directed by Ridley Scott in 2010, the other starring Taron Egerton as Robin Hood from 2018. I will talk a little bit about those at the end of our discussion of Robin Hood Men in Tights. But Brian, this is our first time discussing a Mel Brooks movie. Mel Brooks is somebody that I almost think is kind of been forgotten because I think that, anytime you talk about comedy, there are those problematic elements, and those certainly exist in this movie as well. But the one thing I can say here is we have a great cast across the board, and I think we have some funny moments, but we also have some things that don't work out so well. So Brian, what made you select this movie, and how do you feel about it 32 years later?
Well, this is, I guess, the second or third Robin Hood movie I'd ever seen at this point, because I definitely saw it on VHS on rental in 1993. And, clearly this was soon after Prince of Thieves, and I was already comparing in my head, like, oh, they're copying this, or they're making fun of this, and that's the idea. Or that was like the first time as like a 5-year-old I realized what a parody is. It's almost as if this movie introduced me to the concept of parodies because of the timeline of the release dates between the two movies. So it just kind of fit. And I watched this on YouTube, and if you look at the comments on YouTube, there's a lot of people that have like a very similar story with me in terms of finding this movie, about how they found it as a kid at the video store, or it was on TV or something like that, but around the early 90s, and they just watched it so many times that you kind of grew to love it. And in this case, for me, I've just seen it so many times. I love this movie, even though it's like a 7. It's still like very memorable in terms of the lines and the dialogue, and I'm always laughing my ass off, and it just brings great memories for me when I was a kid when I watched this movie. And I figured this is a good way to kind of end Robin Hood month. Like, we get a historical kind of look at it from like a film historically, from the 30s onto the 70s, the bonus content with the 50s, and then on to the 90s. And you can kind of see like the 90s, they try to go darker with it. And Mel Brooks is like, what are we doing here? Why are we making it so serious? And then 2 years later, you get this movie, and it's like, this is the tone that I've always wanted in Robin Hood movies. Just have some fun with it. It's always about good over evil, and that's, at the heart of this movie, as stupid as some of the jokes are, like, that's kind of the heart of every Robin Hood story, right? Is the good conquering evil, and this kind of gets that theme down really well, more so than I think Prince of Thieves does, because that's varies into the gray areas. In this case, this is straight up black and white, and when it comes to that, in terms of like the message, it's clear. And I think the lightness of it all felt better, and the colors were brighter, and the lighting was brighter. So I much appreciate this version. For sure.
I do agree with you, but I do think it runs in, because the movie is both homaging the 1991 movie in a lot of ways. I think there are elements of that movie, and of course, just with the casting of Cary Elwes alone, you're clearly homaging the 1938 movie. Because he looks so much like Errol Flynn, behaves like Errol Flynn, acts like Errol Flynn. So you're kind of like doing both. And I think some of the tension that exists is because they're doing both. I think you end up with a movie that's probably 15 to 20 minutes too long. I think this movie would be a lot better if it was 85 to 90 minutes as opposed to 1 hour and 45 minutes. So I think that's the issue for me, is that I think there are some elements of this that flat out don't work nearly as well as you would hope, but I still think that it is mostly successful at what it does, in terms of the comedy, in terms of the casting, and some of those individual scenes. It's just, the problem that we have now is we don't really get these kinds of movies at this point. And part of what I think is going to be interesting is that you have something like Scary Movie 6, which is, I think they're playing in the same sandbox. I think it's in a lot of ways. But I think that what I find to be interesting about this movie is that it is kind of at the end of something. It feels like it's the end of Mel Brooks. Like, obviously he does Dracula Dead and Loving It, but you can feel some of the strain and the fact that, somebody like Mel Brooks, who has had an unbelievable career, like, a lot of times these comedic directors and actors have a shelf life, and I think you really feel that, coming to an end, especially the fact that, really does basically Dracula Dead and Loving It, and that's about it, right? I don't think he has anything in terms of like directing, like he's still.
In terms of directing, no. Producing, yes. History of the World Part 2, which I watched the first 10 minutes and I realized the tone was not what I wanted and I just didn't watch it, which is
I mean, it
unfortunate.
doesn't really have a lot of. I mean, the reason that Mel Brooks, I think, found a like Mel Brooks' success comes with the fact that the producers became such a hit Broadway show, and obviously he's an executive producer, so he made a shit ton of money, and I think that's kind of where, like, people are like, that might be his legacy in a lot of ways, is just how popular that show was, and the movie based on the musical wasn't nearly as successful, but I mean obviously it's not Hamilton levels, but I mean that show really was a big deal.
Oh, for sure. And I remember watching the movie, the producers before the new one came out in '04, and I got excited for it. And then I was like, oh, this is a movie based on like a musical style of making the movie. So it's like a completely different tone, and I just didn't like it, even though I know they were kind of matching the tone of the musical. But I still wasn't feeling it as much because it kind of was missing some of the grittiness, some of the adult undertones that the original '68 movie had. So that's where I was kind of like, I was kind of on the fence about it. But in terms of this being his last, big movie, I would kind of agree with that. I'm a fan of Dracula Dead and Loving It more than you are. But I would say like this and Robin Hood are his two like farewells in my opinion. It's like he gets to play in the genre box, which he loves doing. He loves doing like the parodies like Frankenstein. So he's definitely doing the Dracula gimmick and Dead and Loving It. But in this case, he's obviously doing the action adventure. He'd already done the sci-fi parody. He'd already done a Western parody. So I think this is kind of like right up his alley in terms of like what's to do next in terms of like the parodies. Because I think Life Stinks. I've tried to watch the movie so many times on Tubi. It's hard to sit through because it's so cynical. But this was right after this, and this is far less cynical. So I think this is more memorable than Life Stinks. And if Life Stinks would have been his last movie, directing wise, I don't think it would be nearly as memorable as a '90s career, or for the '90s at least for Mel Brooks, because I think Mel Brooks in the '90s is underrated, and this was kind of his farewell to comedy, so to speak. He does go on to produce more, but the older you get, you can't really be in the director's chair anymore, unless you're Clint Eastwood or someone like that who kind of defies the odds. But I think Mel Brooks knew when to take it back and kind of just sit back and let other people take over.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think it's probably to his benefit, and I can't imagine, directing in your 70s and 80s. The fact that Martin Scorsese and Spielberg and Clint Eastwood have experienced a lot of success. I mean, I think that is unusual, and I don't know that we will see that from a lot of other directors. But in terms of what I think this movie, again, what it does well is I think bringing in Carrie Ellis is absolutely the right call. I think that you cast him because of what he did in Princess Bride, and I think you play off of that, the charisma that he exhibited in that movie, and I think he brings a lot of that. I think he brings even more comedic energy, but like they're definitely kind of going with more of the backstory that you see in Prince of Thieves, with him kind of being a part of the Crusades. I mean, obviously, it is much funnier, and I think that really makes a difference. That really helps. But I think you still have the she's not a witch this time, so there's no supernatural element, but you do have Tracy Ullman having a relationship with Prince John, who is played by Richard Lewis. Richard Lewis he's not bad. I'm not a huge fan of his. Part of that is because I'm not like I know that probably the place that he excels the most is Curb, and that is in no way the type of comedy that I really enjoy. So Richard Lewis is definitely somebody that I think kind of misses me. I don't know. For me, I was like, I really wish like someone like George Carlin was in this role instead, just because I think it would have been much better and I think it would have been much funnier. I mean, he and Robin Rees, like, they don't really have a lot of chemistry together. Like, Robin Rees is funny, but like, I don't know that they're on the same wavelength. And I think that's one of the things that Prince John Sheriff relationship is something that, with the that has really never been done well. Probably the cartoon, the one that we reviewed 2 weeks ago, probably does that relationship the best. This is another one that I think is a mixed bag, and I think it's because there seems to be a lack of chemistry.
Well, Richard Lewis, I think, was casted because of his reactions. I think he's got some of the best reactions in the movie in terms of being like annoyed at Robin Hood. You can see it in his face, and he's rubbing his head, and he's just got this annoyed look on his face. And I think that's what like, the casting was for. Um, Roger Reese, you called him Robin Reese. He's Robin Concord in Cheers, so you kind of mix
That's
the names
right,
up.
Robert
But
Rees. Yeah.
he is so good in this role. I feel like I think he's like the unsung hero in terms of like all the actors because he is so like I mean like he's got a great delivery because of his British accent obviously, but he's got that comedic timing that he got from Cheers. And if you ever watch Robin Concord on Cheers, he is like a scumbag, lying son of a bitch. And this is what the prince, or not the prince, but the sheriff of Rottingham. Notice how they change it. Nottingham to Rottingham. Get it? But yeah, I just love his tone and like his disgust and like his annoyance. And then when he mixes up words, the poor guy's got a speaking problem. I think he's dyslexic, which I don't think you would make fun of today, but the way they did it was pretty funny because he kept mixing up the words and they had to recite in the same take. So I thought that was really funny. I thought he did a really good job of that. And of course, Amy Yazbek, I think, is a great comedic actress. We talked about her during The Mask. I'm just glad to see her happy in this role because, 9, 10 years later, man, her whole world would be flipped upside down and she wouldn't even go back to Hollywood or really go back to acting as much after the death of her husband, John Ritter. So I'm glad to see her just smiling, nostalgically or whatever. But I think she's a great comedic actress, and she proved her like worth in this. And I think she had some great reactions, and I think she had a great chemistry with Carrie Eels. And I think
I
there,
think she's underused. I mean, I think her chemistry with Carrie Elwes is really good. I just feel like there needed to be more of her in this movie, and I think part of the issue is again when you have the Prince John Sheriff relationship, you have the shenanigans going on with Robin and the band of merry men. Like so much of the focus is on them. And look, I mean, Mel Brooks has definitely had solid female performances in his movies, but they are kind of one note. Like, what is the difference between Amy Yazbek in this movie and Daphne Zinning in Spaceballs? Like, there's almost, in terms of the way that their characters are portrayed, in terms of the way they're written, right down to the thing about the way that sex is treated with them. Like, it's basically the same character.
yeah, I could see that. I guess it's kind of the trope of both the genres, maybe just the way that the Princess Leia character is kind of parodied, and the way that Maid Marian is parodied. That's kind of the way I kind of figured it. I mean, that's kind of the only way. Because like, if this was a more serious movie, obviously they would try to make her more of the fighter we've seen in the previous movie, or in movies coming up that are yet to be released. But I think that in terms of their chemistry, like yeah, they should have had more scenes together. It felt like they should have had like a musical number together, except they were just kind of singing back and. I think they had individual singing numbers, but not together, which I think was kind of a missed opportunity. But other than that, I feel like that was like a great, because like you don't get this chemistry in the Prince of Thieves. Like they don't have that kind of relationship. But here it's like, oh, they're just like horny for each other, and they got this like glow for each other, and they got this great chemistry. So it really works out better than Prince of Thieves does. So I think that's a big strength to this movie is that they got that relationship down. Because if you don't get that down, it's like why are you rooting for this couple to get together, right? So. Um, and I think as a note here, this might be our third Isaac Hayes movie reviewed. Um, South Park,
Yep.
Escape from New York, and this. So I guess we've reviewed more Isaac Hayes movies than Mel Brooks movies. But
I mean, he's pretty damn good. I mean, he's only got a very short role, and I was kind of sad. I was like, I totally wanted more of Isaac Hayes and
they
less of Dave
switched. I
Chappelle.
don't know why they switched it. Like, because obviously in Prince of Thieves, it's the same role, and he would go on to protect Robin throughout the movie. And in this case, he's like, "See ya, Robin. Go protect my son." It
Clearly,
was-
they saw something in Dave Chappelle, which is fine. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Dave Chappelle these days, and I think he's miscast in this movie. Like they're clearly, I don't know what they're going for, but it feels like one of the weakest
It
elements of the
feels like they
movie.
casted him based on his delivery of the Malcolm X parody speech. I think that's what got him the role, to be honest. Because like,
I mean,
I can't
it would not surprise me, but
I
the
can't
rest of
picture
the
Morgan Freeman
performance.
doing that speech, right? Like it doesn't feel like it would be Morgan Freeman. But if it's Dave Chappelle with the glasses, it's like that's memorable because that's definitely the most memorable scene of the movie for him. So I don't know. And for some reason, I always misremember the Plymouth Rock thing because, like, I know the actual line is "We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us." But as a kid, I saw this first before I saw Malcolm X, so I thought the original line was "We didn't land in Sherwood Forest. Sherwood Forest landed on us." And I thought that was the original line for like a long time as a kid. So,
I mean, it's
uh,
pretty funny that they went with Malcolm X because I mean that was a big deal in 1992. So it's just funny, like you really have to put yourself in that mindset of, oh, people would have just seen a Malcolm X movie just a year earlier, and I mean, I'm not sure that Mel Brooks is the person that should really be doing Malcolm X parodies. Especially given some of the issues with Blazing Saddles and things like that. But I mean, again, I don't think it deters too much from the movie. I mean, I was not feeling Dave Chappelle in this role, and again, so similar to Richard Lewis, like it just feels like they're kind of in a different movie than Carrie Elwa's Amy Yasbeck and Robert Reese. I mean, I just think that those three like are clearly on the same wavelength that it shows. I think it just works out really well. And everything else, I mean, it's a mixed bag.
I do like Mel Brooks as Friar Tuckman because this feels like he's starting to take a back seat because it felt like for a while he didn't do any of the lead parts of his movies. And then he kind of went back and started doing the lead parts of his movies in like the 80s and 90s. And then he kind of like started to do the side role. So that's kind of, a fun kind of look at, because you keep wondering, like every Mel Brooks movie has some kind of like Jewish jokes in it, right? Like because of his heritage. And in this
So
case,
many joke jokes.
it's like, how do you fit this in Robin Hood? And it's like, oh,
It's
just
on the
change the
way.
friar to a Jewish Friar Tuckman. So it's like, okay. Okay. And because as a kid, you're not really thinking about that religious kind of context. It's like, oh, there's this old Jewish man in the movie. Okay. And then you look at the history of Robin Hood, and it's like, oh, what a smart change that was. And then, of course, the whole circumcision thing was kind of disgusting as a kid to see that. It's not actually like the way they portrayed with the carrot. I know they did that on purpose to scare the audience as to what the audience perceives as a circumcision because we don't perceive what it is when we're a baby when it's happening to most males in this country. But man, just that visual just haunted me for so long of what a circumcision was. And then when I was told as a kid that, hey, you were circumcised, and I was like, my thing went through that thing, and then they had to tell me like, no, that's not how it works. And but that's the joke of it all, right? It's to kind of scare you because of these myths of whatever, like a circumcision, blah blah blah. And I like they kind of played with that, and it was kind of like this adult joke that you don't really pick up on as a kid. And like I said, I watched this as a kid, but this movie does play well for kids, and I think that's a big difference compared to a lot of Mel Brooks movies. Like I think Spaceballs plays well with kids, but not so much like a Blazing Saddles. You know what I mean? Or even a Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein, I think, is not kid friendly.
No, I don't think that movie is kid friendly at all. I think the only
And
kid
I think it's
friendly
his best
movie,
movie, but I just think the older you get, the more you appreciate a Young Frankenstein for
right?
what the movie
I mean,
accomplishes.
Spaceballs is the most friendly because because it's parodying what amounts to kids movies. Star Wars movies are designed for kids, so I think that's why Spaceballs kind of matches up. I mean, this one is pretty close, I would say. in terms of like being okay for teenagers, but yeah, I guess this movie could also be construed as being appropriate for younger folks. But what else do we want to say? I mean, I
Well,
think
I want to do a quick shout out to Dom DeLuise because I feel like his career got extended for doing Marlon Brando impressions in the 90s because this is not the only movie he does a Marlon Brando Godfather impression. There's a whole other movie, I forgot the
it is
title,
a
but it's
very
like
good impression. I don't know. This is again one of those things where I feel like this is something that if I were to make this movie 85 to 90 minutes, I would strongly consider cutting that
just cut
out.
that whole scene. Yeah, because it's not for a kid audience, that scene. It's for the adult audience that saw Godfather in the 70s, early 80s that are like,
Yeah.
oh, that's so funny, but I get it now. Because as a kid, I was like, what is going on here? Like, is this, are they trying to kill him? What's going on? And then I watched Godfather years later. I was like, oh, I get it now. And then, the whole like, they're literally quoting The Godfather as well. Like, I hope your first child is a masculine child. So I get that, but I can see why someone would want to cut that, kind of reduce. Because again, that's not a kid joke. No kid would understand that at 5, 6 years old, unless they'd watch The Godfather at 4 years old. But
It also feels like it doesn't really make sense with the rest of the movie either. Like why does he need to go to the mob? Like doesn't really work. Like
I think
if
they
you're
were
gonna do
playing on
that
the thing with the Celtics from Prince of Thieves, which we talked about because they disappeared in the later half of the movie for some
I
reason,
mean
and they
I
had this whole
guess
army. But I
yeah, I
think
mean
they just
again
added that to extended.
this this is part of the problem again with when you are homaging two movies that you end up in this uncanny valley of like trying to clearly honor both of them. Like so you see the return of the archery contest and I think that works out well. Um But the funny thing to me is that when you watch the opening credits of this movie, you would not get the impression that it's a comedy, and I find that to be really interesting. I wonder how they came to that decision of we're gonna play this straight for the first couple minutes, and I would just like to know the thinking behind that decision. I mean, it's fine, like it's just the credits, so I'm not really like judging them per se, but I would just be very curious to know how they came to the decision they did to kind of make the movie's credit sequence and just the first few minutes of the movie feel very different than the rest of it.
Yeah, I've always found that I found that curious too, but I just keep thinking like I wonder if this movie was in production before Robin Hood Prince of Thieves came out. But logically, you would have to think that the idea came from that movie. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to like chicken and the egg this because like it's a quick production time if you think about it, considering that if they are directly responding to Prince of Thieves, which is June of '91, and this is June of '93, like it's a quick turnaround. So I wonder what
I
was in
mean,
place first.
you don't make Robin Hood Men in Tights unless you have a recently successful Robin Hood movie.
So
And
they had to have written the script in that short amount of time then.
I would
So
say, I mean, the
that
thing
may
is,
explain some of the issues with the script.
I mean, Prince of Thieves again. That movie made $390 million in 1991. That is a big deal, and I can definitely understand why you would then say, okay, we want to parody this and we need to do it quickly. I mean, think about how quick, some of those those other movies,
Very
which
true.
I'm not
Quick
speaking to the
turnarounds.
quality,
Yeah,
like
quick
you have
turnarounds on the
to,
jokes.
otherwise it's going to be irrelevant. Like otherwise you're losing something if you wait until 1995. I mean, think about Dracula Dead Loving It. That comes out just 2 years after Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. So there really is that quick turnaround. And if you're going to do these kinds of parodies, you have to be really quick about it. So yeah. How do you feel about the song Men in Tights? I think it's good. It's not a top tier song, but it clearly gets the message across, and I think it still has it has its moments.
They're not sissies, okay? So that's very clear in the lyrics, but it's the typical Mel Brooks. We need a musical number in the middle of our comedy movie to lighten things up. He's a big fan of musicals and Broadway, which is what he brought to the table in terms of all his movies, having a musical sequence, even despite what the tone of Young Frankenstein, for instance, right? And that has that musical number in it. It doesn't really fit the tone, but it's so funny by the end of the song performance. It's like, okay, I can accept the fact that this is in this movie now. So in this case, I wasn't like as happy about it when I was younger. Like I would kind of skip that part. I would forward a little bit to get to the next funny scene. But looking back now, it's like I get it. It's Mel Brooks trying to be Broadway and doing his musical stick, and have that insert song there and kind of have that old school Broadway feel. And at least like all the guys were coordinated enough to pull off the dance sequence. I was a little worried. Like I can't remember if like Dave Chappelle had to stand or not. And then when I watch it, I'm like, oh, he's really dancing. Good for him. He's got the moves down. Even the big guy that plays Little John. So credit to them for getting the choreography down, even though it's a small little set they had to play with. Um, and I do like the opening with the rappers. I just wish the rappers were actual characters in the movie. That's what I thought when I was a kid. Like they were going to show up later on in the movie, and they just didn't. So that would have been a missed opportunity because like five random black dudes rapping in a Robin Hood movie, I think is more funnier than maybe a circumcision joke here and there. But I don't know. I thought that was what I was expecting, but they didn't deliver on that. But other than that, I think the musical sequences are fine in this movie, and I think the music is actually fits the tone, and I like the little jokes about I don't know, just the idea that I don't know. He fucking swims all the way to England on no boat. Just that whole idea was just so funny to me
I
as a
mean, that's
kid.
an Indiana Jones homage, clearly.
Yeah, totally. And it's just so wacky and random. But overall, I would say this is a 7 out of 10. I think, like even the Prince John fight in the river or the lake, I should say, or stream or whatever.
That's one of the
Uh,
funnier
yeah, that's one of
sequences.
the funnier scenes, and that's always like a recurring scene throughout the Robin Hood films, except the Disney one, I guess, because they already were friends when we met him. But I still think that's like one of those again, when the buddies or when two superheroes meet up for the first time and they don't really get along and they have to fight each other to figure out if they're on the same team or not. Again, plays well
There's
here
the
for sure.
idea of the sticks getting smaller and smaller, and then, I mean, of course, you have the moment where Little John thinks he's drowning and he's in the shallowest of shallow pools. So, brilliant, just brilliant stuff. In that scene,
Oh, and Patrick
I'm gonna.
Stewart. How can we forget
How can
Patrick
we
Stewart?
forget Patrick Stewart? Very much taking the piss out of one Sean Connery. Just great stuff.
I
I
know
would
it was great.
argue
It was great.
that Patrick Stewart is a bigger deal now than he was in 1993, and he was. I mean, he was the Star Trek captain, but now he's been the Star Trek captain. He's Xavier. Like he has, I would say, more cultural cachet now than he did in 1993.
Yep, that's the Kevin Feige effect, I guess, because he's got to thank Kevin Feige for that one for sure. Like
I
even at the
mean,
end of the X-Men series, he was still brought back multiple times, and we're gonna get him again in Secret Wars. It's like God bless this man because he knows that there's not much time left on his time card, and he's just giving the fans what they want. I think that's admirable.
and he's also getting a fat paycheck from Disney, I'm sure too.
Just as admirable as well, man. Make that money and make the fans
I am
happy.
not that should not be taken as a negative judgment. I would do the same thing, especially
For
because
sure.
Xavier is just in a wheelchair now. That's easy money, man. Easy money.
For sure. And I love the fact that like he had to like take the biggest kiss possible from from, from
I
AB
mean, of
Asbeck.
course, of
It was
course.
just so funny because like I guess the funny thing about this whole idea is that the king has to kiss the bride or whatever, and the 38 version was very subtle and sweet, and the 91 or actually in the Disney one they didn't even do it. 91 they did it with kind of a stern kind of kiss, and in this one he just kind of like takes advantage, and then of course fucking Mel Brooks with the line. Do you know the line?
What's the line?
It's good to be the king, which is of course a callback to the line from History of the World Part One when he was the King of France. So I think that was a great callback. They even make a
Yep.
callback to Blazing Saddles when they made Dave Chappelle the the sheriff, and he's like a black sheriff, and he's like, "Hey, it worked at Blazing Saddles," and everyone's like, "Oh yeah." It's almost as if he was like referring to his old self in this
Yes.
bygone era, which is kind
Yep.
of fitting for what this movie is about.
Absolutely. All right. That is it for our discussion of Robin Hood Men in Tights. So I watched the 2010 and 2018 Robin Hood movies, and Brian, you
I
absolutely made
warned
the
you.
right call.
I
I mean,
warned you.
I knew what I was getting into, but I was very curious because, like, if you go to Letterboxd and you read some of the reviews for the 2010, you will see some people that say that it's kind of an unheralded classic, and I'm here to tell you that those people are wrong. The 2010 Robin Hood is a complete bore, and apparently there was a script with the Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood being the same person, which I think is interesting. I don't know if it totally works, but I think it is more interesting than the movie we got. You have 45-year-old Russell Crowe as Robin Hood, way too old. Just the movie has a couple good action scenes, but the movie is just humorless. And there is one scene of Robin Hood robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. Kate Blanchett, who is one of our best actresses, hugely miscast as Maid Marian, I would say, as well. And just the way that their relationship is teased out. I don't want to dwell on it. Brian has a number of angry text messages from me. That movie is a 4 out of 10. The 2018 is also a 4 out of 10, but I feel like I could change 3 things about that movie and make it infinitely better. If you go into 2018's Robin Hood with the thinking of they are doing a superhero origin story, this is designed to be a Phase 1 Marvel movie, you will probably set your expectations about right, except for the fact that it's not nearly as good as some of those movies. They make some weird choices with how they do the action scenes. Like, they shoot the arrows like they shoot guns. They frame the war scenes at the beginning like it's modern warfare, which I personally think is absurd and stupid. Taron Egerton is by far the best Robin Hood besides Errol Flynn. Like, he smokes Kevin Costner, Russell Crowe, and even I would say Carrie Ellis in terms of being Robin Hood. I mean, I guess the Ellis performance is different, but Taron Egerton really brings a lot of sincerity to the role. He is clearly the best part. Ben Mendelsohn is also really good as the Sheriff of Nottingham. Like Prince of Thieves, the 2018 Robin Hood does not have a relationship with Prince John and Sheriff Nottingham, but I think it works so much better because Ben Mendelsohn is allowed to cook in such a way that there's like no supernatural. He's just a dick. Like, if you see him in Krennic in Andor and in Rogue One, that is the Sheriff of Nottingham in this movie, and I think it comes out pretty good. But like I said, he is a superhero. He literally has a costume. He literally has a hood that not only covers his head but covers his face as well. Some major Green Arrow vibes, which is fitting because Green Arrow was on the CW at that point, and I don't know if it was a big deal in 2018, but certainly they were going for that same kind of energy. And like the way that it pays off in the ending, like it leads in both movies. It's weird. Both 2010 and 2018 clearly want you to believe there's a sequel. Those will never come. There will not be a sequel to those movies because they were both financial failures. 2018, especially. I don't know that I ever want to see another interpretation of this character again, just because it feels like the 1938 version is the best version, and we haven't really seen anyone that has come close. I mean, the Disney animated version is so different that I think that movie kind of justifies its existence. I think Robin Hood Men in Tights being a parody kind of justifies its existence. But Prince of Thieves, the 2010 and the 2018 versions, have not. They've just been kind of sloggy action movies. And it is, again, I think the 1991 movie was successful just because of the apparatus around it and the fact that you had so many white hot actors. But it's really easy to see why the 2 most recent versions of this story and the way it's been told have been financial failures.
I blocked out 2010 from my head, which is probably why I didn't
I mean,
remember
it's
or
very
remember any of
forgettable.
the details. But then when Jerome kept texting me, I was like, "Oh yeah, oh I remember that. Oh yeah, ugh." And then I started watching the 2018 version a couple weeks ago on Amazon because it was available, and I watched the first 10 minutes and I stopped it right at the point where they're about to cut off the Moore's son's head. Does he actually cut off that dude's head?
Yeah, the son dies. That's kind of the
Oh, that's right. I'm glad I didn't watch it. That was terrible. That was too cruel. I felt unnecessary, but oh my God. That's the moment I stopped. So, yeah.
I mean, Jamie Foxx. I mean, the thing about, like I said, the 2018 movie, I could take 3 things. If I could fix 3 things from that movie, and I think it's the 2018 movie is much more watchable than 2010. I would argue it's as watchable. Like, it's not good, but I think the casting and the performances are much better in 2018 than 2010, and in parts of Prince of Thieves too.
Well, that kind of shows you as to why we picked the four that I or the four that I picked.
I mean, look, you
Because
certainly made the right choices because 2010 and 2018 would not have generated interesting conversations.
Not at all. And we would have just been talking about the beheading because I felt that was so unnecessary and cruel to that character. But thank God I didn't finish the movie then. So that kind of wraps up
And
our discussion for the month.
they kill his son. They kill his son, but Robin Hood still is the main character. Like that really bothers
You would
me.
think that, yeah, that would be from Jamie Foxx's perspective, the Moore's perspective of everything, and him be the main character. Now that's
But
interesting.
yeah, Little John is a mentor.
Which I think he should be, like the way
Like
that
he
they kind
should
of
be, but
portrayed it.
you shouldn't kill his son and then have him be the mentor of somebody else.
Right? Yeah, it's
Like
all
that's
fucked up.
stupid.
It's all fucked up.
It's really really dumb. Anyway, let's talk about next month, Brian. So,
The big
um,
4-0, huh?
it is the Big 4-0. So, on June 7, 1985, I was born, and way more importantly, The Goonies came out. We are going to discuss The Goonies next week in honor of my 40th birthday. And we will be in the month of June. We'll be looking at 4 movies from the year 1985, as I think is only fitting. Like we haven't done as many anniversaries this year, and that has been a conscious choice. But I felt it was very appropriate. We're going to go into some different territories with this month. We have not talked about a Clint Eastwood movie to this point. We are going to rectify that in June. We're also going to talk about one of our. We haven't talked a lot of very many Best Picture winners, which we will do, and we're going to also talk about a very interesting movie in its own right, that being Cocoon, a movie that I have never seen. So that will be some very new
Well, that is
territory.
a movie that I sold on eBay for $100, Jerome, because that Blu-ray is worth $100, and I was on Facebook and bought a lot of movies that the guy didn't realize were valuable. So I don't have a copy now, obviously, because I sold it. But folks, if you find a Cocoon copy on Blu-ray, save that shit and sell it on eBay.
So we are also going to we have a right match. Originally, we were going to do something else related to Goonies, but because of the recent passing of Sabu, we are going to take a look at a very important wrestling event that took place June 7th, 1997. That being WrestlePalooza. And Brian, the best part of that show, or one of the most important aspects, is that we get the rematch of Sabu versus Taz. And there is an episode of Hardcore TV that features that match, the ending of the Dreamer Raven feud for the ECW portion of it, anyway, as well as Taz versus Shane Douglas for the ECW TV title. It is one of the most revered 45-minute television episodes in wrestling history, and we are going to discuss that as the right match for next month.
For sure. And just be aware of the finish for the Taz Sabu match and how much of let's say Piper and Brett was an influence on that finish if you
You
pay
say that,
attention.
Brett. What about Bret Hart and Steve Austin, which occurred
Which
even
didn't
sooner?
Oh, that was 6 months earlier, so that's probably why they did it. I forgot of the timeline. I was thinking that match took
And
place after.
do you remember who Bret Hart homaged at Survivor Series '95?
Oh yeah, Sabu doing the table spot. I guess they're secret fans of each other, so to speak. But
We needed a Bret Hart Sabu.
I know it would have been great because I think they
I
would have
don't know
played
if it
into
would
each
have
other's
been great,
strengths.
but it would have been interesting.
Because I think Sabu psychology wise knows that it plays into people's strength. That's why people like that match with the Big Show. I think it was a SummerSlam, was it? Um, but yeah, I can see because I think We'll talk about this next week, but I think Sabu is good at matching with people's skills. Like there's some other matches that I'll talk about, like some I found on like internet. Like I'm not a La
Well,
Parka
one of the
fan,
things that I
but
would
he had a
like to
good match
do.
with La Parka, which is crazy to me.
So one of the things that I want to do is in the month of June, I do want to do a YouTube exclusive where we discuss some Sabu matches because we will never get a better opportunity to talk about John Cena versus Sabu, or Samoa Joe versus Sabu, or Rey Mysterio versus Sabu, all of which happened in a 3 month span.
Crazy. And that's that 2006 year where
It
TNA
is
was just using guys
wild.
that were not necessarily under
Like this
contract
is
and then
past
showed up in
Sabu's
WWE.
prime too, and Sabu like has one of the best runs of his career in '05 and '06.
And I don't know. I've been thinking about also suggesting for the playlist we're going to put together for Sabu the Cyber Slam 96 match between him and Scorpio, which is 30 minutes, and if you can find it, it's kind of hard to find complete, but if you find it complete, it's like an epic match, folks, and they tried to recreate it at a house show that I found on Peacock. Not nearly as good, folks, because it was a house show, but Cyber Slam 96, Sabu and Scorpio, that's probably one of the better ECW TV title matches outside of like Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lynn that you're going to get, because it was tremendous, folks.
Yes, and I want to mention the fact that George Wendt passed away the week that we were recording this, and I think we should review the another YouTube exclusive for the month of June. I think we should review the Cheers finale, the 3-part finale.
I'm down. I'm down. I would have been down if you suggested the wedding two-parter as well, because that's just pure
I mean,
physical comedy gold. But
part of me was thinking like, what about doing norm specific episodes? But the finale, I think it's just it's been about 32 years. We have not really had a chance to talk about Cheers, and I think talking about the finale will allow us to kind of take a broader look at the whole show.
for sure, and I think we talked about the Christmas special a couple years ago. We're finally getting back to Cheers now, but we're diehard Cheers fans, so
We
it's going to
are.
be a
So
joy.
at
It's
some
going to be a joy
point
to
in the
talk about.
month, at some point in the month of June, we will have YouTube exclusives for honoring Sabu and honoring George Wendt. So that will be forthcoming. Plus 1985, 4 movies to discuss, and episode of Hardcore TV from June 10th, 1997. For Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.